Kuki Shinobu is finally out, and this is a brutally honest look at how she works with different teams and weapons at Constellation Zero. So here's exactly what you need to know about her in this showcase video. Before I reveal everything I learned so far about Kuki, please keep in mind these are only my findings and opinions about her gameplay design. I have nothing against Kuki's character design. I love the fact that she's the real mastermind behind Arataki's gang, and how Ito is just a big dumb guy she has to take care of. Her animations are gorgeous, the voiceover in all languages sounds excellent, and overall, she's a really beautiful and fun character to look at. Now, with that being said, let me show you how I feel about this C0 Kuki with talents raised to level 9. So, in my opinion, her biggest selling point is the elemental skill. It scales with attack for damage, and her max health is used to scale her healing. And right off the bat, I can tell you immediately that her skill damage from the talent, no matter how much you build her, is going to be almost non-existent. It's going to be about 6,000 to 8,000 overall damage if we assume you get all critical hits, which is like nothing. So, I guess we're left with healing. Now, every 1.5 seconds, or at the same time as the ring expands and damages the enemy, the active character will get healed. Keep in mind you can get healed without enemies present, which is nice, and on average, you can expect this healing to be around 2,800 every 1.5 seconds, which will happen for a total of 8 times, and results in about 23,000 healing done. Honestly, that's not a lot for a character whose main purpose, I would argue, is to be a healer, since this skill only affects a single active character. Now, there is a passive talent which will boost both her skills, healing, and damage done for each point of elemental mastery she has. Basically, if you have 100 EM on Kuki, then it will literally add 75 points to healing and 25 points to damage. It couldn't be more simple. I'll show you how more or less this is only meaningful for healing when I talk about her elemental mastery build later in the video, but for now, all I can say is that her skill will be primarily used for healing and causing reactions. You see, the skill's damage is comically bad, but it does trigger 5 reactions in total. Technically, at C0, the skill will pulse for 8 times total, but only 5 times it will actually cause a reaction, and this is because of something called ICD, and I'll leave a link in the video's description if you want to learn more about it. So the reason why I mention her skill's reaction is that if you do decide to build Kuki with elemental mastery, it can deal a decent amount of damage from reactions, which can range from 5,000 if she has roughly 120 AM, all the way to 14,500 if she is fully built with about 790 elemental mastery. Now, you might be thinking, what about her burst? Isn't this supposed to be her big bad attack? Not really. In fact, this is an absolute joke of a burst, because I've tried like 6 different builds, and in the most realistic scenario, you can expect to hit about 30,000 damage if all hits are critical and she's below 50% HP, which extends the burst's animation by 1.5 seconds or 5 additional hits. I hope you understand how bad this is, because I'm talking about using Kuki with health build, since the burst damage only scales with HP. And you could argue, well, what about buffing her and then showcasing the results? Yeah, sure, here's exactly what I did. I boosted her damage with Kazuha, C6 Kujo Sora, and Mona with Hakushin Ring, all for the sake of trying to extract the biggest damage number I can, which resulted in about 10,000 damage per hit, which could potentially go up to 125,000 damage. But keep in mind, Kuki's build here was unrealistic. I've gone out of my way just to give her a ton of HP and critical damage, even if the majority of damage was boosted by her teammates. The irony here is that if you do decide to build Shinobu with elemental mastery, she will end up dealing more damage than with her burst, provided she causes the reactions, but since the elemental skill's electro application is pretty slow, it can easily happen with someone like Xiangling. Oh, and for reference, you can cause 3 reactions with her burst. In fact, I sort of started to believe that perhaps her burst is better off for breaking shields. It can, for example, reduce Hydra Fatui's shield by half, although usually these guys drop like flies before they can get their shield on, but it's also pretty good on Cryo Abyss Mage shield, which as you can see reduces it by a lot. But all in all, when it comes to her personal damage potential, it just seems like her scalings are all over the place. I'm sure a lot of people in the community will get confused how to build Kuki just by looking at these findings, so I guess now would be the best time to actually see her in action in various different teams. So, there's 2 main Shinobu builds I used when thinking about team comps, which is focusing on her max HP to heal and deal burst damage, or going with elemental mastery to also heal and cause reaction damage. First of all, regarding her artifact set, I found that Tenacity of Millilith 4 set is probably her best choice, but I'll also talk about her other sets in my guide video, and when it comes to her weapon, for the most part, I think Favonius Sword is really good because those white energy particles help the team with energy generation, although this does mean she'll need to have a decent amount of critical rate, since you can only trigger the passive when she is on the field, and you don't want to spend a lot of time using her on the field. Otherwise, I also tried using on her a few elemental mastery weapons like Iron Sting or the Dark Iron Sword, but I still think Favonius Sword is her go-to weapon to help make her more useful for the team. Although if I had one, then Freedom Sworn would probably be my go-to weapon as well. Now, the interesting part comes next. As I said before, the way her damage and healing scales is just unnatural. It's all over the place. So first, I tried out her health build, which had HP in Sands, Goblet, and critical rate for Circlet. Keep in mind, I'm trying to build enough critical rate because I want to trigger Favonius Sword passive, which helps a lot by having a critical rate Circlet. So using this build, I first wanted to see her in a Eula team. Now usually, Eula struggles with energy, so Diona helps her out a lot, who is also the healer for the team, but now that Kuki is in the comp, I instead went with Eula, Rosaria, Fischl, and Kuki. The performance was pretty decent, although you really want to have Favonius weapons on everyone except for Eula, because it's really hard to activate the burst off cooldown without Diona in the team, which made me at some point consider just running Diona again, but that would basically defeat the purpose of using Kuki as a healer and reduce the team's overall damage. So I had to make a compromise here and heavily invest into team's energy by using Favonius weapons. Obviously, what's nice about Shinobu and Eula here is that the Tenacity 4 set works really great. It's constantly buffing Eula's attacks, while healing is decent enough to keep her alive and lets you eat a couple of enemy hits when you're trying to pull off Eula's big burst explosion. Now, using the same build, I also put Kuki in a national team. I mean, at this point, you could say that every new character can be used in a national team, just because how strong the core is. However, I did notice that Kuki's healing is kind of irrelevant with both Benny and Xingqiu in the team, so it was time to make the shift and see how good is Elemental Mastery Kuki. And it's pretty decent. It works better than with health artifacts, because she causes the reactions quite often, and while the damage isn't amazing, it's also not irrelevant, since with 790 EM, you can see some nice overloads and electrocharge reactions. Plus, she also buffs everyone's damage with Tenacity 4 set, and if you're using the Favonius Sword, she also helps Xiangling manage her energy. In fact, the passive talent that uses EM to increase healing will let you achieve almost the same amount of healing if you went heavily with health artifacts. So the only thing that suffers is her burst damage, but as I said before, that damage is easily outclassed if you can cause a couple of reactions with her. So moving onwards, I've decided to stick with Elemental Mastery build and see how well she does in something like Ayato National. Again, pretty much the same outcome. It works, and Kuki can offer help here and there with various little utilities she brings to the team. However, the team that I expected to benefit the most from her was Taser. And I was right. There's definitely a lot more value to be gained from her as a healer in any Taser team you're building. So the first Taser team I went with was the one that started it all: Xingqiu, Fischl, and Sucrose. You could argue that this team alone is already meta-defining, but now with Kuki, there's definitely a lot more comfort to it when I play it. Running her with a Tenacity 4 set and Favonius Sword felt pretty great. Xingqiu's and Sucrose's burst costs are expensive, so a Favonius weapon helped reduce them. Tenacity for the most part was there to boost and Rain Sword's damage, although I could have also just went with Noblesse Forced instead. But overall, if you ever wanted to play a Taser team but struggled keeping everyone alive, well, Kuki now exists as an option, though she doesn't bring a lot of damage, even if she has Elemental Mastery build, but she does provide healing and things like buffs from artifact sets or particles from Favonius Sword. Like, the thing with Taser teams is that there's not a lot of healers to choose from. There's Kokomi, Barbara, maybe Jean or Sayu, but you're better off using Anemo with crowd control, and of course, there's Xingqiu who helps reduce damage and heals a little bit, but still, now Taser finally has an Electro healer. And there's many variations of Taser you can run now. For example, I wanted to see how good she is with Ayato, since the Kamisato guy has really good AoE potential when the enemies are grouped, so using him and Kuki in a Taser comp was pretty satisfying. And I have to mention this again, but Favonius Sword really helped a lot with keeping Ayato's energy recharge at a reasonable amount. So overall, in terms of team building, if using Shinobu with the following build, you can expect to get 4 benefits. The first and most obvious one is healing. It's not amazing, but it gets the job done. Then you have the Tenacity or Noblesse Forced buff. I am leaning towards Tenacity more, since this means you don't have to bother activating her burst every rotation, and instead just activate her skill. Then there's also Electro Application, which is slow and steady, and helps her cause reactions for decent damage if she's built with Elemental Mastery. And finally, if using Favonius or Freedom Sworn swords, you either give the team particles or boost the team's damage. The last final benefit that I can't really say is important to be considered major enough would be her burst's Electro Application, which can help reduce and break enemy shields like Cryo Abyss Mage or Hydro Fatui guy. But yeah, these are the benefits Kuki can bring to teams and the comps that I use her in. So what do I think about Kuki? Honestly, I think she's half-baked. I'm not sure if Hoyoverse are positioning her for when Sumeru comes out since, there's been a lot of rumors going around what will happen with Dendru, but at the same time, I see a lot of things that just don't make sense. Like for instance, I kept mentioning Tenacity Forset and Elemental Mastery build. Do you realize how hard it is to get Elemental Mastery on artifacts? Let alone you would also need to farm one of the worst domains in terms of how efficiently you could otherwise spend your resin. Like yeah, Kuki can deal more damage with Elemental Mastery build instead of using her health build, but at what cost? The damage won't be groundbreaking, and I feel like for the majority of players, it will be less stressful to just go with health build instead. Oh, and speaking about being stressed, I didn't mention up until this point, but she sacrifices her own health each time you cast her skill, which helps her with achieving two things when she's below 50% health. Her burst will deal more damage, and she also gains 15% healing bonus from her passive talent. But the thing is, you'll almost always immediately switch from her to someone else, and in the Abyss, you'll often see her hanging on low amount of health, since if there's no one else healing, you literally need to remain on the field to regain her health. Otherwise, one wrong move, and almost any enemy can one-shot your Kuki. But I don't want to get too negative here and admit that she does a pretty good job in Taser teams, provided she brings more than just healing for the team, so things like Favonius or Freedom Sworn weapons, Tenacity or Noblesse set to even out her really, and I mean really low damage output, which otherwise could be improved by building her with Elemental Mastery. And since I mentioned her improvements, I haven't activated any of her constellations yet, and I'm planning to make a video on this later, but from all I can see right now, the only ones that matter is her second constellation, which helps even out her skill duration by adding 3 seconds, and the fourth constellation, which I'm curious to see if it will help upgrade her electro application and to see if she can cause even more reactions. But with all that said, I hope this review of Kuki was interesting to you. Please remember this is a casual game and there's very little to do in terms of challenging content, but I still wanted to see what she's capable of in the most challenging content. However, if you think that you'll enjoy using Kuki in world exploration or just building her in your own fun way, by all means just do it and pull for her. To be frank, I always had a weakness for electric characters, and to top it off, she's also a ninja. So what more could you ask for in terms of flavor department? Anyway, thanks for watching the video. I'll be releasing Kuki's guide very soon, so be sure to keep an eye out if you want to bake your Kuki optimally. But in the meantime, I'd appreciate if you could support my channel by subscribing and leaving a like on the video. Thanks, and see you soon.